cause I can have it for the right blow. Like a hurricane, swing like a rain. Self-defense, haters know where to be. We protect the family, I'm around like a G. I eat from the heat of the beats, I'm a boss now. And rock shows overseas like a wrong time. I bring pain like Jack Boy, snatch chain. I get you higher than gold. They wanna know what you learn.
First project, I did it on Race Car Renewal, which I had, I believe it's a 96 Chevy Camaro I bought from a guy and had to do a lot of work on it. The reasons why I did it, I grew up around racing as what I love to do. I've worked on race cars before and I've always wanted to race. There's if it comes up. There it is. There's me in the Electric Duke, which was the electric car that we had here for a couple of years. There's my uncle on the day that he won on my first birthday, which that check is still sitting in the Autotech room. There's me, my dad, and my uncle sitting up at the racetrack, waiting for the races to start. And there's me and my dad preparing to go for the track. The expenses of it all, I spent roughly around $2,826.51, give or take a little bit. I saved around $2,000 from parts being donated, and the hours was 310 hours and 55 minutes. None of them were cheated. The helpers of it all, I had my family, my aunt and uncle. I had Mr. Childress as my mentor. I had Pastor Tom Kohick, which I interviewed him and he gave me a lot of good information. I had Mr. Callaway, which helped me rebuild a couple of things and helped me out here and there. And then I had Mike Green, who donated a lot of parts and helped out some with us. Step one was to find a race car. I looked on, this button will stay on. I had Race Junk, which is where I found the race car at. It's mainly built for a racing site, so you can go in, buy racing gear, race cars, or just different parts that you need. Next was
Oh, the button's popping. You want to go ahead and push it?
Yeah, can you push it for me? Because I was kind of pain. The next one was Race Wrap, which is another racing site which you have to pay to put your race car on if you want to sell it, so you don't get as many race cars. You can search for them for there. Craigslist, which was the next one, which some people would say, really, Craigslist? But you actually can find race cars or other cars that you can turn into a race car on there. And then eBay, which sometimes you can find good cars on there, which I only found 2, which didn't help me much. Alright. The step 2, I had to pick up the race car. It took about $223 in gas. It was an 810-mile round trip, and it took about 14.5 hours. There's us looking at the race car to make sure that I wanted to buy it. There was me handing the money over to the owner of the race car, which was the father of the driver. There's the previous driver, the boy that raced it before me. A little goofy, but he did a good job at racing. So, and then there's me loading the race car up so we could head back home. And
Sorry.
We had to go all the way up to Pennsylvania to get the car, which would make for a long day. And step 3 of it was to clean the race car off, getting all the stickers and everything else off the car. It was before it's all cleaned off and everything, what it looked like. There's me starting to remove all of the stickers, which took a very long time and tedious work. I had to cover up the bare metal because the stickers actually pulled some of the paint off. Cleaning the hood off, the guy got some gunk or something on top of it, so I had to sit there and scrape that off and then paint over top of that. And there's what it looked like after all the stickers were removed. Step 4 was fixing all the damages, which there are a lot of damages on there. I wish I could have showed them all, but a little bit too much to do. There's me, I had to cut the weld off of the back bumper so I could remove that from the damages done to that. There's me beating the back bumper off with a sledgehammer because it was wedged in there so tight I couldn't pull it off by hand. I had to weld the new bumper on, which was a lot of fun, and took 2 people to do that, to hold it in place and tack it so I could weld it down. There's fixing, well, welding more of the parts to be able to put on the race car, like gas pedal, bracket, and a bunch of other parts. There's fixing a bunch of the dents, which some of them I beat out, some of them I had to cover up. The engine and transmission was step 5, which took most of the hours. There's the transmission after I bought it, what it looked like. That's completely 100% taken apart, which was a pain to get back because you think you had it completely done, and you look down and there's a little piece laying there that popped out of place or something, so you had to take it completely apart and re-put it back together. There's me working on the heads and everything, making sure the lifters and everything was tightened properly, and make sure there's no damage or debris inside of it. There's me adjusting the headers, which is the exhaust that connects right to the engine block itself, trying to get them in place so I can tighten them up so I can have them running. There's the headers on it was actually hard to get in place because they were twisted a little bit, so I had to do a bunch of prying and adjusting to be able to get them in place. There's my uncle's dog, Drake, which was the supervisor of it all, I guess you can say. He was there by our sides the whole time. The step 6 was the electrical dash and fuel line work, which was very important because without that, the car would not run. I had to change a lot of stuff on the dash, but there's me putting the charging mounts on so I could charge the battery easier instead of having to pull the back cover off and charge it that way. There's all the dash that I had to redo because they were either broken, not there, or were just old and I wanted to replace them. There's hooking up the battery, which was a hard way to get into, a lot of adjusting, crawling over top of the car and everything else to get it in there. I had the fuel lines, I had to hook up to the fuel cell, which is the red part there on the box that you see. That's the fuel cell itself. And then I had to run the fuel line, which had to go from the fuel cell itself through the inside of a car, through a tube, and out to the front of the car, so it would be properly done. Step 7 was fabrication, which a lot of people would think fabrication is just metal work and everything else on the outside, but you actually have a lot of welding and cutting and bending of metal and all to do. There's me making the bracket for the gas pedal, which I had the blade kind of came apart on me, so I was a little jumpy right there for a little bit, but alright. There's fixing the front bumper. The guy had a lot of open holes and everything else I had to cover up, so I wouldn't get dirt all up in my motor or in the radiator. There's fixing the front bumper as it's completed, all the work on that. There's welding on the back bumper, and yes, that is a blanket over top of me because the weld did hurt when it landed on top and wanted to stay there. And there's us tack welding on some of the sheet metal to cover up holes and everything else. Step 8 of it all was sanding and painting, which took a little bit of time, but there's it completely sanded. Found out there are about 4 or 5 different colors to the car. But there's me priming the car, which I used a piece of cardboard there so I didn't paint the tires or paint inside the car or the engine itself. There's it all primed up, ready for the final coat of paint. There's us taking in with the tape, getting it set up so we could do the final paint job, which took 3 of us to do because we had to start out with a small piece of rope, holding it on there to get the right angle and all, and then we could finally tape it on. And after we got it all painted, we decided to go ahead and replace the front door on it because with the paint job that was on it, it didn't look too good. So the final touches of the whole car was the paint job, which I blacked and whited it out so y'all couldn't see the final color of it and all until we got outside. There's me standing next to it, well, sitting next to it. And if y'all will follow me,